I can get her to scream her head off. So.
Good evening and good afternoon or good morning to all those who are joining from wherever in the world where you are currently joining our event this evening. Tonight's evening's event is going to be focusing on the topic of sustainability and diversity in stakeholder capitalism. My name is Jackie Steele, and on behalf of myself and my co-organizers at 7th, we're very grateful for your interest in our event and for your participation this evening. Enjoy Diversity and Innovation Japan の創設者代表取締役スティール・ジャキと申します。語彙の育み再を楽しむおミッションとして2018年頃から学問の世界への国際研究、専門知識や教訓を民間企業のリーダーに発信してきました。Enjoy ではカナダにおいて実践され続けている多様性と革新のモデルをビジネスリーダーを対象に提供し、企業に対する経営戦略の革新及び経営変革、Change Management に関するコンサルティングを行っております。カナダ人政治学者、そして日本の CEO として学問の世界と企業を結び、架け柱になりたいと願っています。I would like to briefly share about Enjoy in English as well as part of the opening, and then I would like to hand to my co-conspirator from 7th to likewise self-introduce and also share about 7th. So Enjoy Diversity and Innovation delivers holistic change management solutions that combine the science of intersectional data analytics with the art of inclusive and co-creative ecosystem design and implementation. We empower senior leaders with the wisdom and the concrete tools to ensure that diversity rocks innovation for their people, products, and the long-time prosperity. We help companies in Japan unleash greater creativity, solidarity, and excellence to drive sustainable innovation and inclusive corporate culture that shines bright within Asia and also across the global market. Today's theme of sustainability and diversity within stakeholder capitalism is going to interrogate these themes both from the perspective of how we understand and define sustainability, and then how we understand and define diversity, and why these two are so fundamentally important when we think about the value added that so many stakeholders need to gain from the current models of capitalism in the Reiwa era and in the year 2021. At this point in humanity, there is much that we need to think seriously about in terms of how we build sustainable solutions and inclusive cultures for change. On that note, I now wish to invite my co-conspirator for this evening, Kevin Mitchell, to offer his welcome and also to share with us about the work that 7th is contributing in Japan and globally. Kevin, the floor is yours.
Jackie. Hello, everyone. Some people are still joining, but I guess we'll have more and more people slowly flow in. My name is Kevin Mitchell. I'm the CEO slash CTO of 7th. We are a social enterprise along with Jackie and Joy in the Social Change Makers program. And tonight we wanted to bring you all in here to hear what we have to say, along with Trista Bridges, Emi Onizuka, and Ken Shibusawa. 7th, as I said, is a social enterprise, and our goal is to basically have corporations be more socially responsible, help them move in the right direction when it comes to social impact activities and sustainability. To achieve that, we're building 2 software platforms, but we can talk about those platforms more later this evening in the separate breakout rooms. With that, I just wanted to hand it over to Trista so she can get us started. Trista, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Welcome so much this evening, or as Jackie mentioned, wherever you're coming from in the world. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Trista Bridges. I am co-founder of an organization called Read the Air. We work with companies, both large and small, to help them put sustainability at the core of what they do. I'm also author of a book called Leading Sustainably, The Path to Sustainable Business and How the SDGs Changed Everything. So in my work, and also I think in Japan, the topic of sustainability had in recent years has really exploded in terms of there's a business, particularly in the business world. We've seen it all over the place. You've probably seen signs in the metro, you've seen companies producing reports, talking a lot about the things that we need to do, for example, to get to net zero 2050. This has been a very hot topic here in Japan as well as elsewhere in the world. One topic that also has become much more important here is the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Obviously, over the last year, certainly since we've had the pandemic and also with many events around the world, including in the US and elsewhere, this topic has really leapt up the agenda. But the question for us is really kind of, what about this intersection with sustainability? How do we think about the two? And when we're moving to more of a model of stakeholder capitalism, what does sustainability and diversity mean within stakeholder capitalism? And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We have a very distinguished group with us tonight that's going to be talking. You've met Jackie. We're excited to have her join a panel a little bit later on as well. But we want to start with two keynote speakers. And I'm going to just quickly introduce our keynote speakers. First of all, we have Ken Shibusawa-san. And I should say up front, tonight we're going to refer to everyone in first name, so everybody is aware how we're going to refer to us. We're going to make sure that we're all treated equally. And so a couple of words about Ken. So Ken actually has a very, very strong financial background. He's been in the financial industry for a very long time, and he very much was ahead of his time around this topic of stakeholder capitalism and sustainability. In fact, in 2001, he founded the Shibusawa Company, Inc., a strategic advisory firm for alternative investments and ESG. And SDG alignment, eventually SDG alignment and human resource development. And so this topic was a very new one, I imagine, at that time. And Ken was one of the first here in Japan to be kind of talking about that topic. He also founded in 2008 Commons Asset Management. It's a mutual fund dedicated to deliver long-term investment opportunities to Japanese households and Japanese people. He's also a strong advocate for stakeholder capitalism. And in his family, he'll maybe talk a little bit about, I think his great-grandfather, who's the founder really of modern capitalism in Japan, and was a really strong advocate even at that time for stakeholder capitalism, which we're kind of coming full circle back to now. And he's also involved with various initiatives, including the UNDP SDG Impact framework and development of that. So thank you so much for joining us, Ken. He's our first speaker today. We also have Emi Onozuka, who has really been an important figure in the area of stewardship across Japan. She worked for many, many years for Goldman Sachs, 20 years, in fact, in various capacity and roles. And she really is a leading thought leader around how do we think about ESG and sustainability, particularly in a corporate context. And in fact, at Goldman Sachs Asset Management, she was stewardship and responsibility head, leading research in ESG while she was there in her tenure there. Emi is also very active in various initiatives across the community, including chair of the Steering Committee for Japan Stewardship Initiative, as well as co-champion of Tokyo chapter for SASB, which everybody may know as the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which is a very, very important part of sustainability if anybody is aware of it. And it comes up a lot. And so we thank Emi so much for joining us today. I actually have known Emi for the last couple of years, and I know she has so many incredible things to add on this topic, and particularly on the topic of diversity in general. So to get started, the way our format will be is that we will ask Ken and then Emi to kind of give us a bit of a talk. And then after that, we will kind of phase into a short panel discussion, and Jackie will join that, and we'll have a deeper discussion on this topic. So I'm going to hand it over to Ken. Please, Ken.
Okay, Trista, thank you very much for your kind introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Ken Shibusawa, and I'm glad to be here with you today. I guess thought leaders all over the world, I guess, regarding this topic that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm very excited to be here. Opening remarks. So let me put up my slideshow. Okay, I guess you guys can see this. I think we're at this very, very important juncture in the world, and I think especially for Japan. And at this important juncture, there are many people that have basically, given up on capitalism. That they can't envision a brighter future with capitalism. So through our discussion today, in my opening remarks, I think we should sort of revisit what origins of the capitalism as it was seen here in Japan when it first started about 150 years ago, and also the future. And I get to do this in 10 minutes, right? Interesting.
You have 12 minutes.
12 minutes. Okay, I get to do 12 minutes. Okay, great. All right, so let's get started. Anybody know what this is? This is in Japanese rongo, but in English it's a mouthful. It's called the Analects of Confucius. Basically, this represents virtue, human virtue, right? That's one. And the other side is this. Any idea what this is? For Japanese audience who probably know what it is immediately, it's called soroban. In English, it's called the abacus. I've never used the word abacus in a regular daily conversation, but it's called the abacus. And this basically represents the business side. And the reason why I bring this up is the fact that, as Trista mentioned, my grandfather's grandfather, which I think makes him a great grandfather, is known as Shibusawa Eiichi, or Eiichi Shibusawa. First name is Eiichi, and is known as the father of Japanese capitalism. And from 2024, he'll be on the $10,000 bill, which is kind of, well, it's very unusual for a business person to be on a denomination of any currency. But the highest currency in Japan, $10,000 or $10,000 yen bill. And his philosophy basically was that longo, the virtue side, and business, it has to be integrated. So basically, and. In the Japanese context, when I speak, I refer to this as tono chikara, the power of and. And in that respect, it's saying, you know, you need both. You need both. It needs to be integrated. That's basically the message. And, you know, he said this about 100, 150 years ago, but it seems like, for instance, like the SDGs, leaving nobody behind. This is what this is a big and. You know, the world is a big and. It's not or the have or the have-nots. It's everybody together. And so basically, I think what my great-great-grandfather Eiichi was saying you know, back then resonates very much with the present day narrative about sustainable development and goals. I mentioned that we're at this very important juncture in Japan, and let me take you through Japan through the Japan demographics. This was 1930, so Japan entered the Showa period. My father turns 92 this year, and he was 1 year old, and we had this very beautiful pyramid-shaped population pyramid. And basically, through the Showa period, we had this, you know, growth based on this population pyramid, with what we call the baby boomers supporting that growth. We enter into the Heisei period from 1990. This is called the lost generation, lost decade, and lost 2 decades, 3 decades. And we can see that the demographics went from this beautiful pyramid to this sort of double, in Japanese you would say hyotangata, in English, I guess, a sort of double barrel shape. And basically for the last 30 years, it kind of went like this, it shifted upwards. And the reason why I think 2020 is a very important juncture, and currently 2021, is the fact that I think going forward, let me rephrase, the past 10, 20, 30 years, the way the Japan operated will be much, much different from going forward from beyond 2020. And the reason why I say that is because the last 30 years we had this, you know, funky double-barreled demographics, and look what happens in the next 30 years. I mean, it just goes into this reverse pyramid. Beautiful, but it's reversed, right? And so what we're seeing is this huge demographic shift, change of the generations. Basically, passing the baton is being passed by the past generation that made the past success in Japan to the next generation that has to make the next success for Japan. And I could talk about, you know, this like for hours on this, but let's just say that the reason why I think it's very important looking forward is look at 2020 and look at this. Look what happens with, let me get the, okay. check out this guy. This is the baby boomer males, right? Oji-sans in Japan, right? Look what happens to them. In just 10 years, SDGs, you know, their numbers go down significantly. Look at the women. They're still around. and so I think even the next 10 years, there's going to be this big shift in the way Japanese corporation must be run, and we can go into the details with the panel discussion later. But as you can see, the speed and the scope of change going forward in Japan, I think it's going to be humongous. Is my call, just looking at the Japanese demographics. And based on this, though, so the past experience for Japan, the success model was made in Japan, right? So we basically supplied mass consumption needs of the mostly advanced nations of the world with mass production. And we did such a good job at it that America became very angry with us and started this bashing. And so when we enter the Heisei period, the next period, Japan changed its model a little bit. We said, oh, I'm sorry, we'll make it in your country, made by Japan. And so we changed from made in Japan to made by Japan. And that was a logical call, but the Heisei 30 years, it started with Japan bashing, but towards the end, you know, it was Japan passing. It went from bashing to passing the last 30 years. So I'm hoping that the next generation's new model is not just made in Japan or made by Japan, but this concept of made with Japan. And basically it means that actually the population pyramid, if you look at the 30s, 20s, and 10s here in Japan, it's very, the numbers dwindle. There are like population minorities, demographic minorities here in Japan. But if you look at the world, if you look at especially the developing world, that generation is the big volume zone. So if you think about it, the generation, the 30s, 20s, 10s, the millennials and the Generation Z, they're called a digital native, which basically means they grew up in an environment where you're connected to the internet automatically. Internet has no borders. And so if you think about a world without any borders, even though you're working here in Japan, you figure out that, oh, we're not minorities, we're majorities. And so for the new generation with new set of values, I think there's a possibility that Japan can thrive in this new environment with this made with Japan, basically meaning that it supports the sustainable development of the world with Japan. And that's the model that I'm hoping that we'll see in the next 30 years. Only got 10 minutes, and so I'm going to close with this one note that actually my great-great-grandfather was known as the father of Japanese capitalism. Capitalism in Japanese is shihon shugi, but he never used that word. He never used the word shihon shugi. He used the word actually gappon. Gappon. And if you know the kanji, the awaseru is to merge or match. Hon is basically, it's like the building blocks. And so basically, his sense of capitalism when he started here in Japan was to put together the building blocks for a society. And you think, what is a building block? Well, it's financial capital, but it's also the human capital as well. And so I think the phrase stakeholder capitalism, it's known as this new sort of trend for this current world. I think what my great-great-grandfather was saying was 150 years ago. If you translate it into common day English language today, it's actually stakeholder capitalism. So was that about 10 minutes or 12?
Yep, excellent. Thank you so much, Ken.
All right,
I really like the made with Japan, and we're going to talk a little bit later about how that'll even be possible and how diversity is a really important part of that picture. So next we have Emmy. Emmy, over to you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to this very important and exciting event. I would like to, kick off with where I stand now by looking at what I have been doing, till this point. So can you bring up the page on my introduction? So thank you, Trish, for a wonderful introduction on myself. The next page. As you can see, I am now with the company called Japan Catalyst, which is part of Manex Group. You may have heard that Manex Group is an internet brokerage business as the main line of business, and headed by Oki Matsumoto, who is the founder. And previously, I was with Goldman Sachs, and that's where I did a company engagement for the probably 4 years of the last bit of my career there. So the reason why I moved from being a passive investor, where stewardship is done in a very much of a long-term holding-based approach, to current firm, which is more of the shareholder activism. You can call it an activist fund. Mind you, it's not very scary. We approach in a very friendly manner, but very constructive way. The reason why I moved from GSAM to this company is that I feel that Japan needs to show the ability to change and the magnitude of change, which can bring the positives to corporate Japan as well as to the society. So, I have done 200 companies engagement per year in the previous role. Now I'm more in the management seat and also in the marketing position with Catalyst, but the spirit is the same. So today I would like to give you a bit of a insight into what we do as an activist investor in Japan, and how we think about the diversity from an investor angle. And we believe that this will bring so much value out of Japanese company, which will bring up the shares of those companies, and also give returns to those who are invested. And our investment base now is individuals in Japan. Next page, please. So diversity and innovation. This is exactly the topic that I want to bring to your attention. If you go to the next page, you can see this is our company, Japan Catalyst. We manage this fund called Manex Activist Fund, and basically engage with very concentrated manner, 10 to 20 companies, to bring out the best of their value. So that currently those companies' shares may be left to be quite cheap in valuation, but they actually got potential, so that can be valued a lot more. And next page, please. And the reason why I say diversity and innovation is that you can look at the performance on this page that we have started just about a year ago. So this week, we actually marked the celebration of 1 year anniversary on June 25. And we are able to generate this plus 43% return just over the year. And also we got awarded by this Nikkei Veritas award for its innovation of the product. And how do we bring this about? The next page is amongst us. So these are just the senior members. We have more analysts and others in the mix, but you can see that this very innovative product, in a sense that usually activist funds are offered to institutional investors, but our fund is offered to Japanese individual investors. That means that we have money flows every day, and the engagement with companies usually take 2 to 3 years. So this cash flow management is very, very hard, but we have a mechanism to manage that. And also we actually bring in Japanese individual investors' thoughts and opinions into our engagement conversation, and also engage with not just with the investee companies, but also the government, industry groups, peer activist funds, all these engagements and interactions that bring about that level of performance. But that's all based on this team, which is quite diverse, from generational, gender, nationality, and even skills and background. Next page, please. So I want to quickly give you an angle how we look at diversity from an investor's perspective. Next, please. So we're talking about stakeholder capitalism today, and sometimes people bring shareholder capitalism in comparison. But in our opinion, shareholder capitalism is not necessarily the opposite of stakeholder capitalism. It is more about the part of the stakeholder capitalism, which that we expect the companies to perform both in terms of shareholder value and stakeholder value. So as you can see in this chart, many of the Western corporations were more focused on in a short-term performance. So that's to be said shareholder value up, but not so much stakeholder value. On the other hand, as many of you know, Japanese companies for a long time have been caring for employees, have been very mindful of the environmental footprints. So there's a saying called Sampo Yoshi. So, it was more of the stakeholder capitalism from long time. But what has been left was shareholder value creation. So we would expect both of these types of companies to go into the right-hand top quadrant, that creating shareholder value as well as stakeholder value. Next page, please. So I want to give you a bit of insight how we look at this notion of diversity in three angles. So first is the areas of diversity. Where are we looking for diversity and their different levels or areas? The second one is effective diversity implementation. So in this, we actually, when we do engagement, and this has been the case since my time at Goldman, we feel that there are three areas that, if implemented successfully, diversity, equity, and inclusion can go really well. And those are three things listed here. So this is a top-down, management agenda. So we definitely need top management commitment. And this has to be aligned with corporate strategy. And Tricia mentioned that I'm involved in SASB organization. And in SASB's framework or standard, they actually focus on financially materially important areas. So in that case, diversity is generally very important across Japan, but there are more significance in relation to financial return or financial risk in that sense in some more sectors than others. So management need to look at how and how much to do diversity and push the agenda at what speed depending on the sector. The second one is programs. So those are actual implementation programs that company offer. So if you want people moving from one department to another, maybe there's a free agent type structure, some programs for maternity leaves, fraternity leaves, things like that. So those actual programs need to exist. And also, not the least, but the role models need to exist. So we actually look at the number of or percentage of board members in a diversity category. Also the senior management, those things we need role models to further implement diversity. And lastly, I'll talk a bit about the corporate governance code revision, which happened just in recent weeks in June in Japan. So next, please. So this just quickly show you the outperformance of stock performance, stock return, depending on how much diversity you have. So at board level, if you have more than 10%, the stock outperforms the market. At the senior management level, it's tend to be set more than 20%. Next, please. And this one is actually a relationship between corporate financial performance and gender diversity. So left-hand side, it shows you, so taking the top performer in diversity versus the bottom performer. And if you look at the margin, EBITDA margin, there's a clear differences between the top performer and bottom performer by the percentage of margin by 21%. So the top performer in diversity has much higher margin than bottom performer. The right hand side, it's a little hard to understand, but the top one, it's basically that in top 25 companies, more females executive level are represented in line roles. So there are more females in the line role who are executives. And then the second one is a similar concept but different. So executive teams that actually welcomes more female from line roles than the staff roles. So in both cases, it's important that we actually leverage more females in line roles to generate performance. And I'm not saying that the staff side diversity is not important, just that this is a past kind of statistics. The next bit, please. So the last section I would like to end is Japan corporate governance reform. As many of you know, we kicked off our, under Abenomics, the corporate governance reform started in 2014, and it has been progressing with different guidelines, measures, codes from JFSA, Japan Stock Exchange, MITI, all these different government bodies. But most recently, this corporate governance code by Japan Exchange Group has been updated. Next, please. So there are two more slides. So the first one, the corporate governance code actually updated this 2.4.1. It's kind of hard to read, but the red part is the update from this time. So you can see that corporate governance code focuses on the diversity across the workforce, not just the top management. Next, please. And this one is the diversity at the board level. And what they say is that the diversity can mean very different things. It can mean skills and experiences, race and backgrounds, etc. And also asks the company to make it transparent so that investors can understand. And as you saw in my previous slides, we actually believe in diversity and innovation. And diversity is a driver of innovation. So we actually tend to like diversity at the board level much more than those companies who don't have those. The last page, please. So transparency. So there's what's set to be that this is the current state of Japanese companies. You can see that there's a skill matrix on board members. Many companies, as you can see, the skill matrix is not even created nor disclosed. So that means that investors cannot understand the board mix, how the diversity is displayed. So we actually are in very much support of this diversity as well as transparency of it. So with that, I will end my presentation and then I will talk more about this in the panel discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Emmy. And thank you for setting the scene for our panel and particularly making the case for diversity, which I think is really important. We're still, many people still struggle with this, even though there's some very, very good data, as you're shown, as to why it really makes a substantive difference in terms of performance of companies. So thank you so much. So actually now we're going to come into a panel with Ken, Emmy, and Jackie. And before we get started, I just wanted to say a couple more words about Jackie's background. So in addition to her work at Enjoy, she's also a teacher and an academic. And interestingly, her work is also around disaster risk governance, and she teaches this at the Graduate School of Global Environmental Studies at Sophia University. And she also lectures across many universities across Asia. And she's lectured, for example, at ICU, at Stanford, and Hiroshima University. And other people may know her work in the community as well. She's co-president of FEW, which is a very important, FEW Japan, which is a very, very important organization here in Japan. And she also leads the Global Diversity Management Committee and is the governor with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today. And let's just get into it and ask a few questions around a lot of the very interesting things that we've heard thus far. So one of the things that we know is that we're making this shift from the kind of stakeholder first model to a kind of a broader model that takes into account more things, stakeholder capitalism, we can call it, whatever we might. But one of the things that has been really important in this discussion is the environment. And that's something that seems to have really leapt up the agenda for investors. I want to ask Ken his opinion as to whether they're taking diversity, equity, and inclusion as seriously, for example, as they're taking climate change in terms of thinking about companies and what they'd like to see from them. You're on mute. I mean, and from the investor's perspective, I'm curious as to how they
and it sort of depends on your definition of they, because there's lots of days out there, and obviously a fund like Catalyst will obviously be looking at it. We look at it. We're not an ESG fund. We're not an activist fund, but we're a long-term fund, and we established in 2008. Our investment process is very simple and it's very analog. But the way we look at it is when we look at corporate value, there's the financial value, which you can put a number on it, basically. So we call it this tangible value, I guess, in Japanese, mieru kachi. And then on the other hand, there are intangibles that they can't put a number on, and it's called mienai kachi, because you can't put a number on it. But as a long-term investor, we obviously look at the financial and the tangible value of a company. But if you think about it, how does a company, create long-term lasting value? Is basically because it has lots of intangibles that you can't put a number on it, and there's lots of aspects of an intangible asset or a value of a company. But if you had to put one label on it or one asset of a company that outranks everything else, it's the people, right? It's people that works at the company. Any company in the world, not just Japan, will say our greatest assets is our people, right? Whether it's an investment bank or whether it's an automobile company, they all say that, right? If it's a greatest asset, look on the balance sheet. Where do you see it? Well, you don't. It's not on there. It's on the it's on the P&L as a cost center or a cost. But if you think about it, the people are crucial in long-term value creation. And some of the companies that we've looked at or we've invested in because we felt they had potential for long-term value creation, they didn't do very well for the first couple of years. And we started investing in beginning of 2009. We invested in Shiseido because we thought that was has a long history, has actually had a great governance structure even back over 10 years ago. But it didn't really do well for a couple of years. Which is fine with us because we do dollar cost averaging. When it gets cheaper, we use buy more. But then Mr. Wiltani came in, and it really, he in a couple of years, he really turned the company around. And one, you get diversity of top management, somebody that comes from the outside. That was a big game changer. And he brought in diversity in terms of managing the company because he went straight to the ground. He went to the shops and stuff, and he had direct communication with the people, and that basically it really loosened up the organization. And as a result, we saw in the last several years prior to COVID, but vast outperformance of the company. And so to me, that kind of shows that a Japanese company has lots of assets, and that's the people. But in a sense, they've been frozen in that place. But if you bring in the diversity, whether it's from the outside or whether it's female or it's just even the biggest diversity I think we need actually in Japan is this age difference. It's all the sort of same. Man is very in a strata, but if you bring in a diversity, basically what that it does is basically says, oh, that's another way of looking at things. If you put it simply, right? And if you look at another way of looking at things, you find that there's actually lots of value that was being locked up, and and you can. What's the right word for in English? But it basically, just find that you had all this great value in house that because you brought in the diversity, that it just bloomed, into tangible value. So.
Great. Very interesting case study. And one of the things that when we talk about ESG, you know, diversity kind of falls into that S, right? That's kind of how we tend to think about it. However, I feel that sometimes that maybe we're treating it as a separate entity, as a separate part of this whole discussion around sustainability. Emmy, I know that we kind of exchanged some emails on this topic, and you said, well, actually, you're seeing something different. You're treating that differently at Monex. Can you talk a little bit about that? Curious to have your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Tris. So I understand that there are many parts of Japan that still struggle to kind of embrace and really act upon this DE&I. And I actually saw a great kind of improvement or uptick on this topic within the my own kind of organization, which is Manex Group as a whole. So Manex, just to give you a bit of a background, it has always embraced, diversity and inclusion. But this E, the equity, actually, was brought up more within that last 12 months and actually signed up to global kind of initiative, and we actually made a statement that DE and I really is a base of our future success. And as Shibusa-san or Ken said, that we may not see that right now in our visible way, but it actually definitely adds to and empower our employee and staff to really contribute to corporate value. So it really depends on how it's treated from the top. And as in my presentation, I feel that this is really need to be acted upon at the board level. So if you look at the Manex Group board level, it is a public, listed company. So you all can look at the integration report, various different reports. But that board itself is already very diverse. So female, male, international, even generation. So these things will need to start from the top, and then it will be embraced throughout the organization. And it's always on our mind. And I recently actually experienced a very interesting kind of case in a daily operation of things. So we were trying to come up with a name for some series of video program that we actually put out. And for a B2C company, we do a lot of video shooting and have a lot of different series. And we had this one kind of title that we had in mind. But somebody from the team said, "Is that really diversity mindful?" And somebody like, "Oh, actually, I didn't think of that." And we actually changed it to something that's more, neutral, in gender, more, supportive of diversity and concept. So once that's from, starts from the top and trickles to the actual daily operation, that's where the value really start to happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you've given us some really good best practice examples. And I want to ask Jackie about whether this is, common, particularly in large companies versus small companies that you're seeing. Do you see a shift in terms of how they're starting to tackle this topic? You've been working around this for a long time. Do they see this as kind of a have to do, which gayatsu, I guess is the term that you taught me, or as opposed to kind of wanting to do? Because it seems that Emmy's saying they've gotten to a place of wanting to do this. Talk to us a little bit about, Jackie, about how things are changing, if at all.
Sure. Thank you. And I'd agree. It really depends on which they were talking about. I mean, there's of course the trends coming out of North America, and I think the trends in America being quite different from even Canada, from what we see, and the trends of the last 2 years of America, obviously having a very big shift in terms of what is being tackled, and then the trends in Japan over the last 10 years have been really shifting, I think, in interesting ways. I think, we know, and to Ken's point, that, people are the heart of the company and they're the ones who drive. But it's really, I think, again, as we see from Emmy's point, it's the tone from the top. And I think what is perhaps interesting is We know that there's, 80% now, this was a Deloitte survey, for example, saying that 80% of respondents, and this is a Deloitte survey, so looking more at North America, 80% of respondents, employees, said that inclusion was one of the factors motivating who they wanted to work for, and that 40% of them would change companies if it were to go to a more inclusive company. So this is motivating the way that we see young talent really thinking about, and even mid-level talent really thinking hard. We see statistics also out of Japan really indicating that the young generation is wanting work-life balance. They're not wanting to become sort of the corporate warrior gisei, self-sacrificial lambs that they saw their parents' generations go through. So I think that's a really interesting bottom-up phenomenon we see. And then, of course, in terms of thinking about, I think a lot surveys out of the United States, or sorry, out of Japan, looking at the Economic Intelligence Unit study on Japan and innovation, a lot of C-suite are very conscious, and senior executives in Japan are conscious that the talent war is a pivotal point for them to think through in terms of innovation, and the availability of talent is really key for their ability to drive innovation within their companies. There's a significant amount that realize that this is something that also is going to, that the fact that there's a declining talent pool in Japan, as Ken's presentation showed the declining birth rates and those shifts over the next 30 years until 2050, they're seeing that the declining shift in a domestic availability of talent means we need to be more reliant on importing global talent. But yet, we see that C-suite, in terms of the numbers of people who see, for example, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or what I call diversity, equity, and innovation, to be something that they, as C-suite leaders, actually need to have a strategy for and care give personally themselves. It's actually quite a low figure. It was only around 20 to 25%, where we saw the top in Japan, and these are senior executives. This was a survey of the 50 executives. And so I think there's a gap. I think there's a changing evaluation of where companies are identifying the pain points, but then to what extent do we see the top then saying, okay, I'm actually going to do D&I and think about DEI as my core business strategy, because my people are at the core of how we can stay competitive and also build innovation for good. So that's an interesting shift, but I think it is changing. And certainly I would like to see a broader conversation coming from Canada and the models that we work on. We talk gender, age, generation, ethnicity, multiculturalism, disability, and I think thought diversity. And we need all of those to be a part of the conversation if we're really going to diversify our boards. And certainly that's where my research has looked at diversifying parliaments. All of those elements, I think, need attention. And it's the combination of all of them being diversified that gets the robust competition of ideas we need to really get sustainable innovation. And I think solutions that work for a diversity of people.
Great. And I actually wanted to ask you just a quick question that one of our, I think one of the participants might have posed as well. What do you see as the biggest differences between how this subject is treated here in Japan versus what you're seeing in other markets?
I think the biggest difference is Japan still tends to function around really just a conversation that's primarily gender. Diversity is sort of contracted to mean gender diversity on boards. It means the woman problem. It means getting women into the paid labor. It's kind of single issue. And I think maybe in the United States, certainly there's been more of a race and gender conversation, and then LGBTQ potentially as well. The conversation in Japan in the last 4 years has now included more about LGBTQ, I would say, as well as the gender conversation. Global talent is kind of the buzzword we hear instead of talking about multiculturalism or interculturalism in the workplace. But really, we're talking about having sort of a more intercultural space of neutrality in the workplace, so we don't have one culture having a hegemonic, I guess, domination of what the group think should be. And I think in Japan, if we could have a broader shift to be more than single issue and to really think about these things with 5 different diversity points concurrently at the same time, certainly that's what Enjoy's advocating. I think that's how we move the dial systemically.
Absolutely. And we've talked a little bit about larger companies and such. I'm curious as to how SMEs are dealing with this. And Ken, I might ask you that question because, in Japan, I believe there's something about 70% of employment here is basically small business. And most of our companies here, as many places around the world, are small business. And this can, I imagine, it can be quite a difficult topic for them to navigate. Are you seeing anything around diversity, equity, inclusion amongst SMEs?
Sure. Again, SMEs, there's, like you said, most of the people work for SMEs in here in Japan, so there's lots of SMEs, and so there's there's a spectrum of SMEs that either engage in DEI and other issues, and people that don't even know what the word means, basically. So I'm saying that you get a whole wide range. But if you think about it, the discussions, what Amy made and Jackie, is the fact that it's important for top management, right? Top management to commit to something and to drive down, what's important for that company. And if you think about it, well, large companies are very complex. But SMEs, I mean, there's the boss and he's the owner, and if he makes the right decision, it happens, right? And so in that respect, there are actually some samples of really interesting cases of DEI, and let me just show you one that actually I know that I visited actually. Now, this is a company called Weston. It's based in Gifu Prefecture. And it's a factory. What do? I mean, it's they're in this. West is basically waste cloth, and you need this for manufacturing in the automotive industry. Actually, it's really if we're like what's we call it, the jet engines for Boeing and things like that. It's really, the qualifications are very high. But it's not sort of the sexy sort of work, and it's dirty and stuff, right? But what these guys do actually is if you go to their factory, they employ actually a lot of mental handicapped people, and and it's basically a conscious effort by the owner, Shacho Usui-san. And they're very, in a sense, it's Kengak Kosu, so they're very open about it. So they want to show what we people we would consider as handicapped. Actually, if you give them the opportunity, and if you set up the work process and the workflow in a way that they understand, they can be actually a productive members of society. And so this is just one, one case, but there are other cases that if you scour all the way through Japan, you'll find it. And so just because they're SMEs doesn't mean that they have no interest in DEI. It's the other, in fact, the other way, and they could have more commitment actually than a larger corporation.
Interesting. And I think it's nice to kind of show that SMEs also can be very engaged, like you said, around this issue. We often turn to just big companies. And when we think about Japan, we think about these massive corporations, and there's so much change that can happen amongst organizations of all sizes. One of the things that we talked about earlier, and I think Jackie talked about quickly, was the war for talent. And Emmy, I wanted to just pose this question to you first, and then we'll kind of have Jackie maybe follow on. We're seeing a shift in younger people choosing to go to other types of companies, whether they be startups or small companies, even in Japan, or foreign companies. So oftentimes the perception that maybe the foreign company has this kind of more inclusive, we'll say, culture and environment. Are you seeing this shift underway? And do you feel like this is a significant enough motivator to convince larger Japanese companies, perhaps, that are, or even smaller ones that are more traditional companies, to change as well?
Okay, thank you. So maybe I want to point to my kind of career background, where as a new grad, I actually joined a US based company called JP Morgan financial institution, and then moved to Goldman Sachs. So together I worked for an American capital based company for over 20 years, and now I'm with a Japan based Manex group. And I don't think it's necessarily a question of where the capital is coming from. And it is really kind of going back to how the management, the board, think about D&I as well as other important factors for sustainability, and make that into part of the strategy. So I think it's up to the people who are looking at companies as an employee, or the management that's looking at themselves from being the management side of the company, how they really want to lead the company or the company that they want to work for. But I point to you one thing that probably Goldman Sachs does well more than many of other company is that they actually admit to say things like unconscious bias. I think it's a starting point in DE&I that we actually do have some level of prejudice, high or low, but actually in order to be really inclusive and really value generating, we need to admit it and then go beyond that for collaboration and creating innovation. So I think that to kind of bring that up front, making it open and discussing it, and then how to consciously, overcome that, I think it's very important. And one, clearly not a gender, not race, but, things like time zone. I actually clearly remember going through a training called Working Across Time Zone. And, people in the US, because it's a US based company, it's during their day. But for us in Asia, it's actually middle of the night. So, just there's some tips that the people in the US can utilize. Those are not, being nice. These are actually skills that, these trainings actually empower people to be more effective in collaboration, including, us from Asia for more, thought-provoking conversation. So I think for Japan or any companies, I would, urge that, top management actually sets the agenda, set the strategy, but also really, be honest, be open about this, the people, human nature type of thing, and empower employee and staff to be skillful at it. So I would say diversity and inclusion and diversity, equity, and inclusion is a skill.
Great, thank you. And Jackie, before we're going to have to get into our breakout group soon, but I do want to ask one other question after you comment on this point, Jackie, please.
Okay, great. And I mean, I do think I would certainly agree in that if we go back to the statistics I was looking at before for the 2020 Economist Intelligence Unit, it was, I guess, 38% of C-suite executives in Japan saw that they had responsibility for talent management. And these are the big companies, right? 50 of the biggest companies in Japan. That's what they said. What that says to me is SMEs, wow, do you have a competitive advantage right now to move the dial and say, if you want to beat them and get the best talent, to attract the best talent away from the big corporations who are kind of, maybe sort of, they're kind of asleep at the switch, some of them, maybe they haven't realized that this is something they really need to invest in as a business strategy. I think there's an opportunity for SMEs, and for the reasons that Ken mentioned, they're small, they're agile. You're not talking big numbers of people. We're talking about, to get to 50% women when you're only a 50-person company, that's not a big stretch to get to diversity of thought, to get to diversity of generations within only, 50 people, or a company that is, 20 people. We're talking small absolute numbers to get change that is now getting to the symbolic, we have, gender parity, or we have generational balance in our company. We have, people with disabilities who are employed in key areas as well. We have people who are both global nationalities and Japan, born and raised in Japan. Those SMEs really, I think, can move quickly. And if that's a way that they can attract best talent, I think that's a really important window that they can move on. And it is a tremendous amount of jobs that we're talking about across the whole Japanese economy, and particularly across all of Japan. So not just thinking Tokyo-centric, the big companies and the headquarters of the big companies. If I can take just one moment to share one screen that I think is quite telling, and where I think companies have value added, the SMEs. This is just a quick look. I'm not sure if you can see the screen. Give me a shout if you can, Trista. Yep. I mean, it's the chronic sort of human-made inequalities and crisis risks in Japan that I've mapped from long work story. I don't know how to expand let me see if I can do this properly. We have the declining birth rates and aging society phenomenon. We've known this for 30 years. We've known it for 30 years, literally. I've been learning about this since 30 years ago in Canada. We have a long working hours culture, which is fundamentally at odds with child rearing and elder care and caring for people and children with disabilities. So these are exacerbating, right, at the same time as shrinking regions and not really investing in our regions to be hubs for talent development and innovation hubs in across the regions of Japan. Stratification, economic stratification, the self-sacrifice culture, when we know that the young generations don't want that anymore. So I think if we're thinking forward where the SMEs can really invest in offering a different model, I think there's a lot of ways in which they have the agility to do that faster than the large corporations.
Great, thank you. And I want to ask just one final question in closing, and I would like just to maybe 1 or 2 word answer from each of you, or a sentence, and which was, I thought, a very good question that came from the audience. And it was basically, how do we encourage companies to stop, we all talk about greenwashing or pink washing or rainbow washing with SDGs, and actually authentically engage in sustainability and diversity? What's one thing they could do? From each of you, please. Emmy first.
Okay, I'm the it. I would say, start acting. Stop talking, but start acting, demonstrating what you believe in. And it will definitely tie to SDGs or long-term goals of, sustainability overall.
Okay, Ken? You're on mute.
Yep, I got it. I would say it's similar, but in a sense, don't talk about what you can do or cannot do, but kind of talk about what you must do. In Japanese, it would be できるできない. We talk about that all the time, but it's やりたいやりたくない. And so if you want diversity and sustainability and equity, do you want it? Do you want it not? If you don't want it, don't do it. That's simple. But if you want it, say it and then do it.
And Jackie.
I'm going to put on my political scientist hat and my CEO hat and say we need evidence-based strategies that are working at the systemic level across the change management structure. Companies need to know their bottom line and they need to know their start line. They need to start with a DEI audit, and they need to have Enjoy come and help them on that. Build the audit, understand and know thyself. Where are your weaknesses? Where are the low-hanging fruits that you can move forward on quickly? Get the diagnostic of the biases in the system. I think we spend a lot of money, $30 million a year annually in the United States on unconscious bias training and other types of D&I for very little output and gain. And that makes me sort of horrified. And I think if you're going to do it and spend money on that, work on the biases in the ecosystem. Unconscious bias works on the mindset of the individual leader. It doesn't necessarily remove the bias across the ecosystem. And as a political scientist, I know exactly where those biases are. Political scientists study institutions and organizations to find where those problems are and the inequalities are being actively reproduced. That's what we do, right? And so I just think begin with the audit, have a start line of where you're going to go up using evidence, and then track your performance religiously and be accountable for performance so that you're spending money and you know what that money is being spent on and where the progress is. Because otherwise I feel like it is a lot of just DEI washing and it's not even good for business. It's just a waste of money.
Great. Thank you so much, Jackie. So thanks to our 3 panelists. I think that was a fabulous discussion. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And now we're going to transition to some breakout groups, so we'll get a chance to interact. So I'm going to hand it back over to Kevin and Jackie. Thank you.
Kevin, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, I got it. So from now, we'll move into breakout rooms where we'll hear more about what both Enjoy and Civent are doing within our respective areas. If you're interested in hearing more, please join us in the respective breakout room. And we'll be in there for 15 minutes before heading back into the main room.
See you on the other side.
Yeah, there's 2 breakout rooms, one for Enjoy and one for Civent. You can post a message in chat if you want us to move you, or you can just move yourself if you're not sure. If you want us to move you and you're not sure how to move, we can move you manually, or you can just head over. And there's 24 people left. There's no ongoing discussion in here. Maybe people are away from their keyboard. But we'll be back in this main room in about 15 minutes. I guess, Krista, you have to leave soon, right? You're muted.
Muted. I was going to come to the breakout room quickly, just to kind of check it out and then probably head off.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna head there. Thanks, Trista. Beautiful
Thanks.
job.
Thank you. See you soon.
And thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Brian, are you going to hang out here and move people to the breakout room, or?
Yeah, I was gonna wait and see if anybody needed to be moved.
Yeah, you might have to talk to people.
Talking now.
No, I mean to like let them know in case they're not aware that they should move.
All right. All right. If anybody needs help moving to one of the breakout rooms, let me know. Otherwise, oops. Bella, I'll move you. Can you move? Sorry, Jocelyn? Okay, hold on one sec. Did you get in? Okay, one sec. No problem. Right, so
So it's the same people.
Maybe they finished the seminar. They finished the seminar without us.
Jackie, it's the same breakout room.
It's like they're gone.
Sorry, I was muted. The automatic breakout rooms give 60 seconds. And I think their group is taking their 60 seconds because they didn't know that they would need to shut down. So I think they're just taking that 60 seconds for them to wind down, I assume. And then they should be coming back because the breakout rooms were closed. Yeah, if there's other interesting questions or whatnot that people want to float while we're waiting for the others to come back, I would welcome that.
Oh, they're still here.
Hey, Toga. Okaidi, we were really over time. Kavan and our group was realizing that we needed to go back to the main group. So
we did the same thing, Jackie. So
such great conversations, right? It's hard to break away. But I think, are people coming? Are they all coming back, or have some of them logged out?
Yeah, I think the majority of people kind of dipped out.
Okay, we've got 22 showing up, but I think, yeah, certainly some wonderful conversations in our group. And Kaven, if you wanted to share about yours and close us off, that would be really lovely.
Yeah, I think I'm very interested in what you guys were talking over in your breakout room. So I didn't get to see it. We spent a lot of time talking about corporate social responsibility and the learnings within social impact and how much room there is to grow within like making social impact. Can you share just like real briefly what you were talking about in your breakout room?
Sure. I mean, I think we had a really interesting conversation around the concept of auditing and what are the international standards right now through which what are the tools we have and how imperfect those global tools or international partial auditing mechanisms and even the ESG definitions not really being holistically developed with all the different historically excluded groups at that table informing what the E should mean, what the S should mean, what the G should mean, and how we think about where diversity fits across all of those three. Where does the environment fit across all of those three? Certainly out of a Canadian view, looking at Indigenous peoples and their sort of interactions within the global space as within business, having a say on the E, the S, and the G, and certainly women having a say on what sustainability means for the S and the E and the G, looking at different diverse cultures, how it impacts differently, and then needing to think globally around those auditing and international standards. But they're just a snapshot. They're just a snapshot partially, and ultimately, a lot of the inequalities we're talking about are globally, historically contextual to each nation state, and so we can't always just cookie cutter it in terms of taking the global international standard and thinking it's going to work. And I think Indigenous peoples is one sort of obvious way that Canada sort of stands out in that regard and says, well, Indigenous peoples were not invited to the party to those international standards. And that's a conversation that's happening. And I think women's voices haven't been heard enough in those spaces, nor have LGBTQ and others. So I think that was one element. And then just how do we think about changing organizational habits through leadership, top leadership, really walking the talk and role modeling it in how they show up at work. Was another angle.
Yeah, I really wish I was in that conversation, but it's reasons to do this again, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
So thank you everyone for joining us. I think with that we'll close it out. Any final words, Jackie?
No, I think I'm so grateful, and I think Sivanth also would share this thought that Impact Tech, the business accelerator we're in, has provided support and workshops to help us grow our businesses over the many months. Nippon Zaidan being the core supporter for the Impact Tech for this opportunity, and particularly the funds that were made available to help us put this PR event together. And I really am grateful for the opportunity to partner with Seventh because I've learned a lot through working with you, Kavan, and your team. And I think it's a beautiful opportunity, and I hope we can organize a part 2. That would be great. So thank you everyone for joining tonight.
Thank you, everyone. I never have much to say, so I'm sorry for that. If you want to, continue this conversation or see what we do next, probably the best way to reach us is email or social media or something. So please do reach out after this event. Don't just disappear. We have to continue these conversations. More.
I'm going to drop your email or website just quick in the chat for everybody to jot down, and that'll be captured in the transcript that we also get through for tonight for our recording.
Well, actually, I don't want to do that, but
okay.
I'll figure something else out.
Yeah.
But we will, Jackie, you'll share the recordings and the live stream and everything. So we'll put that out on social media and stuff like that. That's part of the reason why I don't want to put my email in there. I don't want random.
Oops, too late.
Well, I don't think that shows up in the live stream. They'll just see our faces and us talking, so that'll be okay. And this is already live streamed to the Enjoy Diversity Rocks Innovation YouTube channel and also to the Enjoy Diversity Innovation Facebook page. So that's already captured live. You can go back and watch it anytime you want. But we'll send out the information also through our networks to all of you who joined us. And a thank you to Amy for staying to the end, and also to Ken for his presentation, and to Trista for awesome moderation.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, I enjoyed very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice meeting you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes, me.
Night.
I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
And I'm just going to stop the live stream.